happening right now. Okay, so what's actually happening right now? So the first thing that's happening, and it could seem like meshing it all together, that every single thing is connected, and they are connected, but they're also separate incidences. Okay, so the first thing is Jerusalem protests at the Temple Mount. Here you see behind me the Temple Mount, and you can see just how large the courtyard is in the Temple Mount. You could fit about between 150 and if it's really crowded, 300,000 Arabs in this open courtyard here on the Temple Mount, and it's a place that unfortunately has become. It's supposed to be the place of the Beit HaMikdash. Was supposed to be a place of peace. It's unfortunately over and over become a place of violence, and that's what's happening now. The protests in the Temple Mount are generally don't happen. When they do, it's always over one factor, and this is something that Ambassador David Friedman used to speak about regularly when he was the American ambassador to Israel. And that is that Arabs generally do not create mass violence. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people creating violence unless they are convinced that Israel is about to take over the Temple Mount, destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque. Okay, Al-Aqsa, by the way, just in case you don't know, is not the Gold Dome. Al-Aqsa is actually this mosque. You can see the gray dome here. It's actually this building. This is more of a shrine than a mosque. Okay, but when people think, when the Arabs think that the Jews are about to take this over, then they begin to have violence. Now you'd say, well, when do the Jews try to take it over? The answer is never, but leaders are always able to pass that off as an excuse, either to distract or to cause people to want to create violence. And that's the rumor going around now, that Israel is going to take over Sheikh Jarrah and then is going to take over the Temple Mount. That starts violence. That's why Ambassador Friedman used to say that he wasn't worried about violence on the Arab streets when they moved the United States Embassy from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, because it had nothing to do with the Temple Mount, and it was impossible to connect it to the Temple Mount. And that's why he said he wasn't worried about violence, and he was right. When America recognized the Golan, anything that America would do never really created violence for that very reason. Okay, so that's one thing that's happening. Our protests on the Temple Mount, they have gotten violent. They've thrown Molotov cocktails, which are somewhat like handheld bombs. They've thrown rocks, boulders. If you see pictures from inside the mosque today, you will see that they have piles of, these are not rocks. Rocks, you imagine, are the size of a small ball. Okay, these are not rocks, they're boulders. They're very large boulders. And that's the riots that you have going on here. The next thing that you have is rocket fire from Hamas, which is obviously much more dangerous than the rioting on the Temple Mount. We've had over 1,000 rockets fired. It's important to make note of the fact that Hamas in Gaza is firing these rockets, and they are aiming them at civilians. Okay, that's very important to recognize. Hamas is not aiming its rockets at military targets and missing. They are aiming at civilians. Their goal is to kill as many civilians and to damage as many civilians as possible. Now, Hamas rockets are a lot more sophisticated than they used to be in previous years. Okay, in previous years they were very, very basic type of a metal tube with some gunpowder, explosives on the warhead on the top, fired off without much ability to aim them in the proper direction. And they a lot of times they would miss their targets, and it wasn't something that was really a very dangerous threat. But the rocket technology that they're using is a lot better than it used to be. At the same time, 50% of their rockets still fall within Gaza. They never make it out of Gaza. And we've seen this year already, Palestinian sources have already announced that the deaths that you see of children inside of Gaza have not necessarily come from Israeli missiles, but they've rather come from Hamas rockets that fell short and fell into Gaza, killing their own people, which is a tragedy. The next thing that Hamas is trying to do is they're trying, and you can see in this picture, multiple rockets being launched at once. While it used to be 1, 2, maybe 3 rockets launched at the same time, because the Iron Dome system can knock out easily 10, 15 rockets at any given time. What Hamas's strategy has been, and clearly over the last couple of years, has been to set up a number of different rocket installations that have hundreds of rockets ready to go in a second's notice. Okay, they're not an army. They don't have the technology, these massive batteries that they're able to fire so many rockets. So they set all of these up ahead of time, ready for the battle that's coming, that's happening right now. By sending so many at once, the Iron Dome, which even today is still 90% successful over the last 3 days, has been 90% successful at being able to knock down rockets that are about to enter into residential areas. If it's going to enter into a field where nobody's in this field, or it's going to enter into an uninhabited area, so the Iron Dome doesn't fire rockets at it. But it's 90% successful at hitting rockets that it identifies, or should identify, as about to hit into a residential area. That's not 100%, which is why we've seen rockets hit buildings, we've seen people die. The idea of sending hundreds of rockets at one time, Hamas's idea of doing this, is that they're able to confuse the Iron Dome system, and by being able to confuse the Iron Dome system with so many rockets, some can get through. That's what they've been trying to do.